Okay, so the second part of the course has to do with the possessive adjectives. In Spanish, they can either be in singular or in plural. So whenever you see mi, like mi bolsa, that means my bag or my purse. So mi is my, tu is your, su is his or her, nuestro is our or ours. And they can be in the plural form, which would be mis, tus, sus, nuestros, or nuestras. If you notice, nuestro and nuestra, they end in O or A depending on the gender again. So if you were to mention something that is O, for example, mi bolígrafo, ends in O, so maybe you would say nuestro bolígrafo, for example. And if it were A, you would say nuestra libreta, for example, because libreta for book ends in A, so nuestra libreta. So depending on the genre, that's when we're going to use the difference with nuestro, nuestra, nuestros, nuestras. Okay? In this exercise, we're going to see how well you guys remember. What I'm going to do is read this little article and I'm going to fill in with the possessive adjectives, and the idea is that you try to get them as quick as possible. And if you want, you can pause the video wherever I said them so that you can fill them in correctly. And it's just like a mini practice in the course for it to be a little bit more dynamic. So, México es muy diferente a mi país. Su idioma es español y mi idioma es inglés. Su comida es muy picosa, pero deliciosa. Tiene muchas celebraciones y fiestas. La gente se reúne con sus familiares y bailan al ritmo de su música. Cada familia tiene sus propias costumbres, aunque parecen muchos. Mi amigo Roberto me invita a su casa cada 15 de septiembre para celebrar la independencia de México. Okay, so as I told you before, you can pause it or repeat it wherever necessary so that you can fill them out correctly with the possessive adjective, okay? I'm going to give you a few seconds and then we move on to the other topic. Okay, possessive pronouns. The same, these can be singular or plural. So, when you want to say something like, that book is mine, that book is his, or yours, and so forth. So, instead of possessive adjectives, they become possessive pronouns. So, mío or mía, remember in Spanish, gender is everything. So, you have to identify O masculine, A feminine, and that's it. The same as before at the beginning of the course, what we saw. So, mío, mía is mine. Tuyo, tuya, yours. Suyo, suya, his or her. Hers, sorry. Nuestro, nuestra, ours. In the plural form, míos, mías, tuyos, tuyas, suyos, suyas, nuestros, nuestras. You know, for example, in English, if you're talking about, I don't know, maybe some pencils, you would say, they are mine. But in Spanish, they specify. If it's plural, then son míos. In plural, even though in English they will still be, we only change the verb to a plural form, but the mine still remains the same. But in English it's a little bit different, it changes. Or yours, the books, in English we will say the books are, in plural form, yours. But in Spanish, the verb and also the possessive pronoun is in plural form, and also depending on the gender. It's really uncanny, but we have to learn it like that. So if you were to talk about maybe books, libros, they're plural, but they're also masculine because they end in OS. So you would have to say, los libros son suyos, or tuyos, or míos. depending. If it were a word that, I don't know, if it were, let's say, plumas, plumas ends in AS. So you would say son mías, tuyas, suyas, or nuestras, because they're plural and they end in AS and they're feminine. I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to say, but it has to do with a gender, if it's singular or plural. And remember, it's mine, yours, his or hers, ours. Okay. So we're going to practice a little. So it says, in this case, we have to combine both the possessive adjectives and the possessive pronouns. So, mi casa es vieja y la tuya, because we're comparing, y la tuya es nueva. So we're saying, my house is old, but your house is new. So we're going to say, mi casa es vieja y tu casa es nueva, o la suya o la tuya es nueva. So the good thing about this is that we can manipulate it, or we can include different words to make the sentence our own, okay? The second one, tu camino y el mío se juntan. So my destiny, or my road, and yours come together, or they meet, they join. It's like a romantic phrase in this case. I don't know how to translate it literally, but it's like mi camino y el tuyo se juntan. The last one, tu blusa es linda y la mía también. Since blusa is a feminine word, it ends in A, and we're talking about the other person's blouse, so we're gonna say tuya. Mi blusa es linda y la tuya también. Okay, so depending on the gender of the object or whatever we're talking about, that's how we're going to change it, using the possessive pronouns or adjectives. Okay, I hope you don't have any questions for the last part of the course, well, what we've just seen. If you do, remember, you can play again and you can check it as many times as you want before you move on to the next section. Okay. Okay, so we're going to start with the reflexive verbs. When the action is being done to oneself. For example, in English, when you say, I comb my hair, yeah, you're doing it to yourself. I bathe myself. I brush my teeth. In English, we just add the my to it to show that it's being done to ourselves. But in Spanish, they have a specific, specific verbs to talk about reflexive actions. Okay, so let's get into it. Reflexive verbs are used with reflexive pronouns. Yes. Normally on these verbs, you're going to see SE at the end. For example, to bathe, we know it's bañar. But if you want to say it's a reflexive verb, like to say that the person is doing it to him or herself, then you would say bañarse. So the se, which is the SE at the end of the words, that would be the reflexive pronouns, which we would have to change depending on the subject or the person. So if it's first, second person, etc. So if it's for first person, yo, then we have to use me. How do we say yo? Is like I, but in this case, we want the pronoun that corresponds to I, so we have to say me. Tú is you, so it's te. Él, ella, usted, we use se. Nosotros, nosotras, we use nos. Ustedes, we use se again. Ellos, ellas, we use se. So if you notice, we only have to remember 1, 2, 3, 4 pronouns. Me for first person, te for second person, se for third person, Nos for first person plural, se for second person plural, and se also for the third person plural, okay? So, the examples on the other side is me baño muy temprano. So, I take a shower or I bathe myself, to show the reflexive part. I bathe myself very early. Me baño muy temprano, te bañas muy temprano, se baña muy temprano, nos bañamos muy temprano, se bañan muy temprano, o se bañan muy temprano, because the se repeats, okay? So you basically have to remember four endings, but you just have to know when to use them correctly. For which subject you're going to put the correct reflexive pronoun. Okay? So a little bit of practice. I use different colors here so you can identify what sentence corresponds to which verb. So comprarse is to buy something for yourself. You can buy something for someone, so you would use only comprar. But if you're talking about buying something for you, yourself, then you say comprarse with the reflexive pronoun se, as we mentioned before. Ponerse is like you can put something for someone else maybe, but if you're doing it to yourself, ponerse. Pintarse is to color or draw. So if you're doing it to another person, maybe the nails, you would only use pintar. But if you were to do it to yourself, then it would be pintarse. Okay, so we're going to practice the exercise. Yo, it's first person, so the correct possessive pronoun would be, the correct reflexive pronoun would be me. Yo me compré unos pantalones. Ellos, remember, it's the first person plural, so ellos, the second person plural, ellos se compraron unos pantalones. Tú is the second person, so tú te pones un traje de baño. Ana is a third person, so Ana se pone un traje de baño. The other. Ella se pinta, because it's third person, she. Ella se pinta las uñas. Ustedes se pintan las uñas. So the first person, me. Ellos se. Tú te. Ana se. Ella se. Ustedes se. Okay? Depending on the person. I hope you understand. If not, remember, pause and repeat again until you get it right. Okay? Okay, so we're going to go into the first part of the verb conjugations in the present form. Okay? Okay, regular verbs in the present tense. Remember, in Spanish, we have, oh my God, people are writing me. Come on, leave me alone. I have to go back because they keep writing me, so I don't know. Okay, so we have three types of verbs in Spanish. It's AR, ER, or IR. So we're going to check the correct conjugations depending on the type of verbs, okay? For all the subjects. So first person, second person, third person, first person plural, and second person plural, okay? So amar is to love, comer is to eat, vivir is to live. So yo amo. So we add O to the first person. Tú amas. Él, ella, usted ama. Nosotros, nosotras amamos. Ustedes, ellos, ellas aman. And the same for the ER verbs. It would be yo como. Tú comes. Él, ella, usted come. Nosotros, nosotras comemos. Ustedes, ellos, ellas comen. And the same for vivir. Yo vivo. Tú vives. Él, ella, usted vive. Nosotros, nosotras vivimos. Ustedes, ellos, ellas viven. Okay? So, also, there's something important that you have to notice here. When it's the first person, it's like the most easiest one when the verbs are regular because all you have to put is O. But then from there, the verbs take their actual ending, which is A, normally plus S or the other endings. Okay? If it's E, then it's E, S, or the other endings. And if you notice for I, it doesn't have an ending for itself. So it copies or it borrows the ending from the ER verbs. So remember, ER and IR verbs, they're the same endings. And this will help you to remember every time you're using an IR verb. Exercise. We have the verb bailar. We have, well, bailar is to dance. We have ver, which is to see. Insistir is to insist. So here I'm going to give you guys a chance to complete it quickly on a piece of paper, and then I'm going to give you the correct answer for each verb, okay, depending on the subjects. Okay, so bailar would be yo bailo, tú bailas, él, ella, usted baila, nosotros, nosotras bailamos, ellos, ellas, ustedes bailan. For ver, yo veo, tú ves, él, ella, usted ve. Nosotros o nosotras vemos. Ellos, ellas, ustedes ven. For insistir, yo insisto. Tú insistes. Él, ella, usted insiste. Nosotros, nosotras insistimos. Insistimos, perdón por la pronunciación. Ellos, ellas, ustedes insisten. Okay, so remember, practice is perfect, so you can always practice again, pause the video and do what you have to do to make sure you got it right, okay? Irregular verbs in the present tense, okay? I already gave you the conjugation of the verbs AR, ER, IR in the present tense. But, as we mentioned at the beginning, there are always exceptions in the languages. It's crazy. Crazy exceptions that we always have to remember. They're very important. So, diphthongation is known in certain languages as a way of perfecting the sound of certain words. Do you guys remember when I told you that even though a word starts with A and also ends in A and is a feminine word, we still have to use L because we cannot say la agua? It's the same. That's because of the diphthongation. It must sound correctly. It must be able to come out fluidly or easily, I guess. So they make changes to the language because of that. So it sounds good. So in this case, we have verbs that even though they end in AR, IR, or ER, there are some changes, but in the root of the word, we make changes to the root. For example, there are words that has an O, but we have to change them to UE, or words with an E that we have to change to IE to improve the pronunciation. So almorzar is to have lunch. Comenzar is to begin. So yo almuerzo. If you notice where the O is, we change it to UE. Yo almuerzo. Tú almuerzas. Él almuerza. Nosotros almorzamos. Ellos almuerzan. For E to IE, for example, comenzar, we put yo comienzo. So if you notice from the E, we go to IE. Yo comienzo, tú comienzas, ella comienza, nosotras comenzamos, Ellas comienzan. Depending. Only for specific words, okay? So here I'm giving you a list of the most important words that follow this specific rule, okay? I'm gonna give you the pronunciation so you hear them and you can repeat them on your own. Words or verbs that change from O to UE. The first one we did was almorzar, which is to have lunch. Encontrar is to find. Contar is to count. Dormir is to sleep. Sonar is to sound. Soñar, if you notice there's an ñ, so you have to say soñar is to ring. Colgar is to hang up. Llover is to, well, when the rain falls. Probar is to try. Volver is to return. Morir is to die. Costar is to cost. Volar is to fly. Poder is can. Comprobar is to prove something. Okay, on the other side, the ones in green, we have the changes from E to IE. So we have empezar, which is to start. Calentar is to get heated. Enterrar is to bury. Confesar is to confess. Despertarse is to wake up. Encerrar is to keep yourself closed in, like now with the coronavirus, we have to stay inside. So you would say me encierro, okay, like to stay inside. Acertar, to get it right. Sentir is to feel. Hervir is to boil. Gobernar is to govern. Nevar, I don't know, I think that's when it snows. Divertirse is to enjoy. Pensar is to think. Quebrar is to go bankrupt. Aventar is to try something new. Merendar is, like bread and coffee or maybe tea that you have at late night. That is merendar. Temblar is to shake. Apretar is to squeeze. Atravesar is to go through something, okay? So these are the most common words that experience these changes in the root of the word. So remember and practice them all the time. So, you'll use them correctly, because the objective of this is that you use them the correct way, because you wouldn't say yo empezo because it sounds weird. And it could be confused for the past tense, which we're going to see in another level, in another course. Okay, so our next topic has to do with sequence. When you're talking about what activity comes before another, we call them sequence, okay? So events and order. We have primero, which is first, luego, después de, más tarde, okay? It would be the second action or the intermediate actions. Finalmente, por último, would be the final action or the conclusion. So here I'm only putting you the three most important things. If you had to write a little paragraph about what happened during a day, you could start off with what you did first, what you did intermediately, and what you did finally, okay? So the pronunciation is primero, luego, después de, más tarde, finalmente, por último. Okay? I think I'm gonna have to go back a little, so give me a moment. Okay, so I could say, primero me levanto, me cepillo los dientes y desayuno. Luego me preparo para ir a la escuela. Tomo el autobús y hablo con mis amigos. Finalmente, llego a la escuela y me preparo para un examen. So something like that would be very easy, and you're talking about the different sequence or the different activities that you did for a given period of time. Okay? Our next topic is the use of the direct object. I think here I'm obviously explaining in general, giving you the rules and the structures and so forth. But I think it would be great for you to take my next course, which focuses on speaking. So I'll be showing you different conversations between Spanish speakers and what tips you can use to improve your pronunciation. I want you to focus on how they speak, how they put their lips together, what words do they use, because in every language, the simpler, the better. So try to use simple structures so that you can produce better and you can improve, okay? And I'll be showing you native speakers and also speakers who learn the language as a second language in my case. Okay, so the direct object. Lo is for masculine and singular. La for feminine singular. Los masculine plural. Las feminine plural. And these normally go before the verb because they substitute an object and according to the gender or number of the given object. What does this mean? You know, in English, you can say, I read a book. So a book is our object. That's the object in the sentence. But in Spanish, after a while of conversation, people already know what they're talking about. So instead of repeating over and over the name of the object, what they do is use the object pronouns. So in this case, I said, okay, I read a book. The book is the object. I know book is el libro. Yo leo un libro. Un libro is masculine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the un libro for lo. But remember, the rule says that we have to put it before the verb. So what I do is yo leo un libro, le cambio por yo lo leo. It sounds weird, but we just put the lo in front of the verb and it gets yo lo leo because we already know what we're talking about. We're going to check some examples so you get the idea of what I'm saying, okay? So identify the objects. In the first column, I want you to focus on the first column. Marie or María ve las noticias en las noches. So, what is the object in the sentence? Las noticias, because here is saying Marie watches the news at night. So the news would be the object. So las noticias is the object. I would like you to keep that in mind, las noticias. So if we go over to the other column, we have Mary las ve en las noches. So we change las noticias to las because we already know what we're talking about. Obviously, if the conversation already started for a while ago, so we know what we're talking about. So instead of saying complete las noticias, we only leave the direct object, las. So Mary las ve en las noches. The other example, Pedro prefiere la comida japonesa. Pedro is the subject. He likes or he prefers la comida japonesa, Japanese food. So the object in this case is Japanese food. So la comida japonesa. And because it's la comida, we know that la is a feminine word. So we're going to use the direct object la and we're going to put it in front of the verb. So we get on the other column, we get Pedro la prefiere. Do you see what I'm trying to say? But this only happens when we already know what we're talking about, okay? But if not, if it's a new, fresh conversation, you would have to say it completely. But there are cases when the faster you speak, the better in every language. So we try to reduce the number of words that we use per sentences, okay? So, Rafael lava su auto todos los días. Rafael washes his car. So in this case, the object is his car. Su auto. Auto is a masculine word and it's singular. So we're going to use lo. So if you notice on the other side, we put lo before the verb. So Rafael lo lava todos los días because we already know that he's talking about his car. The next one, la niña hace su tarea. The girl does her homework. We know her homework is the object in the sentence. Y su tarea is feminine, la. So we're going to go over to the other column and we're going to put la before the verb. La niña la hace. because we already know we're talking about her homework. The next, debes tomar tus medicamentos. Okay, this one, there are two ways that we can use it. Tus medicamentos is plural and masculine. So, debes tomarlos o los debes tomar. So, we have two ways we can put it. Since in this sentence we have two verbs, we have a conjugated verbs and we have a verb which is tomar in the infinitive. So, what we do is we can add it to the infinitive, or we can put it before the main verb that is conjugated. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying, but if you look here, debes tomarlos o los debes tomar. So los is for the medicine, right there. Okay. Okay, so here we have los, or you can put it here at the beginning. Now we're going to move on to the indirect object. The indirect object is similar to the direct object that we saw, just that the indirect object is normally referring to a person. For example, I gave my book to her. To her is referring to the indirect object, because indirect object normally refers to a person. Direct object could be a person or a thing, depending, okay? So, the subjects and what the indirect pronouns would be. If you notice, they look kind of similar to the first one, but not really, because in the first one we have to determine if they're masculine or feminine, singular or plural. But here they go according to the subject because they refer to people. What action are you doing to a person? Okay? So, yo refers to a me, first person. So we use the indirect pronoun me. Tú refers a ti, so we use te. Él, ella, usted se refiere le. Nosotros, nosotras, nos. Ustedes, ustedes, ellos, ellas, we use les. Okay? So what does it mean? I'm going to say, I gave the book to her. What I'm going to do is that instead of saying to her, I'm going to put the indirect pronoun. So I'm going to say, I gave her the book, so we put it at the beginning. The same thing happens in Spanish. So let's go over to the other page and we're going to check what I mean exactly. So we're going to start off with the blue column here. Compramos una computadora nueva a nuestros hijos. So we bought a new computer for our kids. For our kids, these would be the indirect pronouns. We're referring to people. So in this case, we have to change it. So we identify the direct pronouns here. Nuestros hijos, they're the indirect pronouns, okay? What this means is that since it's plural, and we're referring because nuestros hijos would be our kids, our children. So they're referring to them, okay? So if you go back to the chart, you will know what is them. So on the other side, we have compramos una nueva computadora. But if you see, nuestros hijos becomes les, okay? So nuestros hijos means less, okay? We're going to see the correct sentences on the other page, but just now we want you to identify, okay, to get an idea of what each thing represents. Andrew compró un libro a María. Andrew is the subject, compró is to buy, a book, the object for whom. So the indirect pronouns or the indirect object is always asking for whom or to whom are we doing a given action. So on the other side, we have Andrew and Maria. Since Maria is third person and singular, we're going to use le. So Andrew le compró un libro a María. The other one, el maestro enseña a los niños a hablar en francés. The teacher teaches the children to speak in French. So Who is receiving the action in the sentence? Okay, los niños, the kids, the students, los niños. What this means is it's plural, so we have to find the pronoun, the indirect object pronoun, sorry, that is used to represent a plural form. So in this case, it will be les, les. El maestro les enseñó a los niños a hablar en francés. Okay? Because remember, all of this has to do with reflexive, okay? Going back to who is receiving the action? Okay, the kids. No tires piedras a los perros. Who is receiving the action? The dogs. Do not throw stones at the dogs. So, a los perros, it's a plural form and it's referring to them. So, on the other side, if you notice, we have to use les. Les. No les tires piedras a los perros because los perros representan les. Okay? Represent, sorry, les. What I basically want you guys to identify here is that in all the cases we put the indirect object pronouns before the verbs. Before the verbs in all the cases. So, les compramos. Andrew le compró. El maestro les enseña, which is to teach. No les tires, which is to throw. So if you notice, they always or they should always go before the verb. Okay? So, step 1. Identify the indirect object. As I told you before, it normally has to do with a person who is receiving the action. Once you identify that, then you have to find out if it's singular, plural, or if it's referring to me, you, he, she, whatever, depending. Once you have that clear in mind, identify where is the verb. Once you have the verb and you know it's singular, then you just put le. And that's it. So it's all about identifying what needs to be changed and what each pronoun represents. Okay, so here I have the answers. Yes, I have the answers on the other side. Here, again, we have exceptions. That's the difficult thing about Spanish because there's so many exceptions that if you don't remember them correctly, you might not be producing the way you should be in the language, okay? So, for third person, when we combine both direct object and indirect object, the indirect object should change to se. I'm going to elaborate. Imagine in my sentence I say, I bought a book for my sister. I bought a book for my sister. I, the subject, bought the verb, a book is the object, for my sister is the indirect object. What it means here is, if we already know what we're talking about, and we don't want to use the complete words, but we want to use pronouns to represent each thing, what we do then is identify objects, identify the indirect object, and then decide. Okay, remember our sentences from the last slide was, les compramos una computadora a nuestros hijos. We had already included the indirect objects. We have that. But imagine we don't want to be repeating una computadora. We don't want to repeat the computer. So what we're going to do is try to change computer to the pronoun. Una computadora is feminine and singular, so we need la. So over here you can see we have la, okay? Andrew le compró un libro. Un libro is masculine and singular, so we need lo. El libro is lo. El maestro les enseña a los niños francés. The language, the French language, is masculine and singular, so we have to put lo. No le tires piedras a los perros. piedras ends in AS, so it's feminine and plural, so we have to use las. I don't know if you got me, but if not, I will repeat. We have to identify the gender of the object, the direct objects in the sentences. Una computadora is feminine and singular, so we need la. Un libro is masculine and singular, so we need lo. El francés is a language, so it's masculine and singular, so we have to put lo. Piedras ends in AS, so they're they're feminine and plural, so we have to use las. What this means now, if you notice, we have le, la, les, la. It doesn't sound correctly. So in Spanish, what they basically tells you is that you cannot have la, 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 la. No, you cannot have so many le, la, le, la. It sounds weird. So what they do is tell you that in third person, I switched the slides, so let me go back. What they're telling you here is when we combine both indirect and indirect object, the indirect object should change to se. Okay? What does that mean? Okay. Okay. So this would have to be se la compramos, se lo, se y se. So all the les would have to be changed to se. But this only happens in third person. That is he, she, it. Like in Spanish, él, ella, o usted. Okay? This would be the correct form. Se la compramos a nuestros hijos. Because we already know that we're talking about a computer. So, se la compramos a nuestros hijos. Andrew se lo compró a María. El maestro se lo enseña a los niños. Se lo would be the French, the language. No se las tires a los perros. Don't throw stones. Stones is feminine and plural, so we use las. And if you notice, all of them becomes se. This only happens when you want to shorten the words, the direct object and the indirect objects to use the pronouns. Only in those cases. If not, you would just use the words normally. Okay? Okay. Our next topic is the use of querer, which is to want or to like, plus infinitive, plus indirect pronouns, plus direct pronouns. I don't know if you're following, but we're going to use the verb querer, plus another verb in infinitive, plus the indirect pronouns. Remember, they're les, le, te, me. Direct pronouns, lo, la, los, las. Okay? Okay, this is what it basically means. We're going to use the conjugation of the verb querer, which is first person, quiero, mostrar. Then we're using our indirect object because it's referring to you, te, and maybe a book, lo. So what it's saying is, quiero mostrártelo. I want to show it to you. I want to show the book to you. So we're changing the book to the direct object pronoun, and to you, instead of saying to you all the time, we say te, which represents to you. Okay, so I want to show it to you. I want to show it to him. Maybe whatever you're going to show the person is a feminine word and singular. So you change it for la. I want to show, do you want to show them to me? Them, because here we have a plural form of a masculine word, okay? So, quieres, if you notice I change it, you, do you want to show them to me? Then, I'm sorry, leave me a moment, please. Okay. Quieren mostrárselas, okay? So they want to show them to them. So maybe your friends want to show some things to your other friends or to some people. So depending on what you want to say, you can change the principal verb, the main verb querer, conjugate it correctly, and then the infinitive you just attach indirect object pronoun or the direct object pronoun. Okay, so here we can see that it's something plural and feminine. Quieren mostrárselas. Okay, another one that follows the same rule is estar plus the gerund, which is normally in the ing, indirect object, and the direct object pronoun. The indirect and direct object can be attached to the end of the word in gerund. In the first example we saw with infinitive, but also in gerunds we can just attach them. There's only one thing that changes here, which is where we would have to put accents. So you know in Spanish there are a lot of accents. That's the only thing that changes, okay? So I want you to see here the verb estar plus the gerund, the indirect object, and the direct object, okay? So, okay. Estoy is the first person. Estoy mandándoselo. Remember, we changed to se. Why? Why do we change to se? Think about it a little. Okay, we change se because we cannot have le, la, la. No, it's not possible in Spanish. So, because the indirect object is already le, we have to change it to se, and we remain with the direct object, which is masculine and singular. Okay, so, estás contándoselo, está explicándoselo, estamos mostrándoselo, están escribiéndoselo. And the only thing, as I told you before, in this structure is that we have to put accents, okay, on the words right here. We have to put the accents, okay? And that's it. So all we do is attach the indirect object and the direct object to the gerund form of the verb. But remember, it's very important to know if it's masculine or feminine. Here I'm giving you examples of only masculine direct objects, but they could be la, las, or los, depending. Estoy mandándosele would be I am sending it to them. I am sending it to them. So instead of saying it and then to them, we just change them for the pronouns, okay? And another structure that follows the same rule is ir a, which is like saying boy, I'm going to, plus the infinitive, the indirect object, and then the direct object pronoun. So the conjugations are as follow. Voy a, vas a, va a, vamos a, van a. If you notice, we always have to put the a because it's like going to. And also in English, when we use going to, then we have to use an infinitive structure. The same thing in Spanish. If you notice, many languages are similar in structure form. So the same thing in English, going to plus infinitive, the same thing in Spanish, ir a plus infinitive form, okay? So, llevárselo, if you notice, we have the se again because we cannot have the less lo, the less la. No, we cannot have two L because it doesn't sound correctly. It doesn't make the language sound beautiful, okay? So we change it to se. Voy a llevárselo. Vas a llevárselo. I don't know why it keeps changing. What happened, man? Vas a llevárselo. Va a llevárselo, vamos a llevárselo, van a llevárselo. Also, in this case, the verbs, they also have the accent, okay? So in this case, guys, it's all about structure. Once you correctly identify the structure, then everything else will be easy, okay? It's just practice, practice, and you'll know when to use them correctly. And we have some other important verbs. They're very common. These, I would say compound verbs because they have a little preposition at the after them. And they're very common, as I told you before, in the language. You'll hear people using them frequently to talk about simple ideas, to express themselves easily. And it's dejar de plus an infinitive, volver a plus an infinitive, empezar o comenzar a plus an infinitive. So if you notice, all of them should have an infinitive after. Dejar de is to stop doing something. Volver a is to do something all over again or to return to something. Empezar, comenzar, is to start over or to start doing something. Okay? Okay. So here we have dejar plus infinitive. So, dejé de escribir. I stopped writing. Dejas de trabajar. I stopped working. Deja de mandar. She stopped sending. He stopped sending, depending on the subject right here. Okay? Dejamos. I didn't put the subjects because at this level you should already know what the subjects are. We have seen them in the other slides, so they remain the same. Dejamos is nos dejamos de leer. We stop reading. They stop studying. Dejan de estudiar. Okay? So if you notice dejar, de, we should always put de. All we're doing is conjugating the verb dejar in the present tense, and then we're putting the verb, depending on what we want to say, in the infinitive structure, and that's it. Very simple, okay? Volver plus infinitive, return to do something. So vuelvo a, all of them also has a, and then we have vuelvo, which is first person. Yo vuelvo a escribir. I returned to write, or I started writing again, depending on the context. Vuelves a trabajar, vuelve a mandar, volvemos a leer, vuelven a estudiar. Okay? So depending on what you want to say, the same applies here. You have to put the verbs in infinitive. Okay? Observe when there is a vowel change. Yeah, I know there's so many exceptions and it's getting crazy, but yes, observe the vowel changes in some words or in some verbs. And I repeat, we're still in the present tense. Well, I'm combining the present tense with the use of articles, indirect object pronouns, and so forth. Well, the basic of being able to produce or to start producing in the language, okay? So, if you notice here, we have the subjects, they remain the same, and I'm giving you a list. What I'm trying to do is to give you the list as complete as possible with all the words that experience this vowel change, okay? So if you notice, I put all the vowels in red. E, E, E. In this case, we're only going to focus on E, and in the other one, we focus on other vowels and so forth. But in this case, what it's basically saying is that we are going to, once we start conjugating the verb in the present tense, we change the E to I. And that's it. All the E's will be changed to I. Okay? Let's start. So, the first one is vestir, which is to get ready or to put on your clothes. Desvestir is to take off your clothes. Repetir is to repeat. Reír is to laugh. Freír is to fry. Sonreír is to smile. Impedir is to prevent something from happening, okay? So all of them go according to the subjects. I'm not going to repeat all of them because you should already know. But if you notice, there's a pattern. We had vestir, so now we have visto. vistes, and also, even though, sorry, again, it keeps changing my thing. Wait a minute. It's okay. So if you notice, even though the vowel in the root of the verb changes, the ending still remains the same. So the first thing that I taught you about the O, then ES, and then E, EMOS, N, they never change in this case because the verbs, some of them are IR, well, all of them here are IR, but the endings don't change. The only thing we're changing is the vowel in the root of the verb, okay? So, visto, vistes, viste, vestimos, visten, visten. Desvisto, desvistes, desviste, desvestimos, desvisten, desvisten. Repito, repites, repite, repetimos, repiten, repiten. Reír, río, ríes, ríe, reímos, ríen, ríen. Frío, fríes, fríe, freímos, fríen, fríen. Sonrío, sonríes, sonríe, sonreímos, sonríen, sonríen. Impido, impides. Oh, I'm sorry. Here it should have been an I, okay? This is not correct. Please change it to an I. Impide, impedimos, impiden, impiden, okay? What I do want you guys to observe is when we're using nosotros, nosotras, if you notice here, the word remains the same. We're not changing the E for an I, it remains the same. So we have vestimos, desvestimos, repetimos, reímos, freímos, sonreímos, impedimos, okay? So in this first person plural, the verb, doesn't change. So we're not going to change the vowel to an I. Only in this case. For all the others, if you notice, the pattern remains the same. Here we have some other verbs that follow the same rule, but not necessarily, we're not necessarily changing an E. In this case, they vary, okay? Because they become irregular verbs in the present tense. Why? Because for some reason, the root of the word is modified, it's changed, okay? To represent, or it is changed to represent something different. So, we have the same, the subjects. Sorry, my throat is getting dry. We have the subjects here, and then we have hago, okay? Then all the endings remain the same endings that we learned for ER verbs. Tener, the only thing that is changing with these verbs in particularly is that we have go, 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 go. So all these verbs in the first person present tense, we use go. Hago, tengo, salgo, vengo, digo, prevengo, maldigo. As I told you, in this exercise, I'm trying to give you all the possible verbs that undergo these kind of changes, okay? So you're probably asking you, oh my God, I will have to learn like a million verbs that follow this rule. No, here I'm giving you the specific words that follow this exact structure, okay? And if you notice here, the verb doesn't change in the first person plural. Here it continues with the same structure, okay? And we just add imos. Over here, this one is a little bit peculiar in the sense that some verbs that has C and then the vowels like ser, so C-E-R, C-I-R, they're not common when we compare them to the other, because here the root of the word changes completely. If you notice here, we're putting a Z. I don't know where the Z comes from because it has nothing to do with the original verb. Well, this happens in the language. So only in first person you're going to see a Z with an O. Z-O, 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 yeah, Z, and then the O. So conozco, agradezco, traduzco, conduzco, deduzco, parezco, reduzco. Okay, and that goes on only for first person, but if you notice, second person, third person, the structure remains the same, and the same rule for first person plural, the hemos. Conocemos, agradecemos, traducimos, conducimos, conducimos, parecimos, reducimos. Okay, so it remains the same depending on the ending of each word. Okay. Okay, guys, so I hope you enjoyed this course, and please practice a lot. Please look out for my upcoming video where I will teach you a little bit more about speaking in the language and tips to improve your pronunciation. Okay, thank you very much and have a good day. Bye.